Welcome to this episode of the People Dividend Podcast. Today, I am delighted to have coming to us from Boston, Massachusetts, USA, Robert Hargrove. And I'm particularly interested in our conversation with Robert today to the extent that we talk about making better leaders, making better organizations, and perhaps even making a better world through our work as leaders and in organizations. Let me tell you a little bit about Robert Hargrove, and he'll certainly be able to fill that in, and we'll have lots of information in the show notes about where to reach Robert Hargrove. But, you know, he is the author of Masterful Coaching, which is a renowned book for that revolutionized the fields of consulting and leadership training or leadership development. He's often been referred to as the CEO whisperer, and has coached executives from top companies like ExxonMobil and Nike. His leadership weekends in major cities have been described as unforgettable and life-altering by 70% of the participants. Hargrove's masterminds cater to CEOs and enterprise leaders, aiming to cultivate their impact and foster organizational transformation. One of the things I think we'll get to know about Robert is that he emphasizes relationships in developing high-performing teams and future leaders. So great to be able to be in conversation today with Robert Hargrove, where we'll talk about strengthening core leadership, creating this better places. So, Robert, please introduce yourself, because I certainly can't do enough justice to your fabulous contributions and career.
Well, when I wake up in the morning, I identify with the fact that I wrote a book called Masterful Coaching. And the New York Times called it a landmark book that created a new profession. I wrote it back in 1995. And there were no coaches at the time. There was the training department in companies. You may probably remember that. There were
I probably led one or two.
Yeah. And whenever I would call up a company in those days to drum up some business, they say, go to the training department, which was the last thing I really wanted to do. So because the programs they offered were so programmatic. So I identify with having written this book, Masterful Coaching, which helped to launch the coaching profession. And at the time, there were coaches didn't exist. There were no coaches. The only kind of coaching they had was when people were fired and they were given a pink slip on the way out the door.
Lee Hecht Harrison.
Yes. And, today, if you throw a rock, you're likely to hit someone who calls himself a coach. So I feel proud that I had something to do with that. But more importantly, I love coaching and teaching people. I love interacting with people, whether I'm being paid $100,000 a year, or I'm being paid zip. I love coaching and teaching, helping people be more, achieve more, and have more than they ever thought possible. Every person I meet is an opportunity to have a coaching conversation that could make a difference in people's lives. So so that's what I'm really that's where I draw my identity. And when we started out, I purposely wrote the book Masterful Coaching to disrupt traditional leadership development programs, which were based on a corporate homogenized competency list, to disrupt traditional business consulting, which was here's my watch. Let me tell you the time. Most of the consulting projects I came across were never implemented by these big consulting companies, and to disrupt traditional coaching, which was more couching, in a psychiatric sense, than they were coaching people. And I based the book on and the ideas on coaching as in the performing arts or sports, where the coach's job is to help you realize an impossible dream. We just had the Super Bowl, and to transform a losing organization into a winning organization or team. So that's a long answer to a short question.
What do you think? I'm just curious before we dive into leadership, and what do you think contributed to the growth of coaching industry, and particularly an industry that has very low barriers to entry?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I really know the answer to that. What do you think?
I think the coaching business increased as organizations look to help people manage their differences in light of increasing diversity in organizations. I would think that was one of the reasons. I think also a pursuit just for people to do better in organizations, and many of the learning and development leaders knew that wasn't afoot with let's sink someone into a 2-week training program or a 4-week training program. I used to lead executive development at Marriott International. We
Oh,
ran
that's
we
very fine. That is
ran
a very fine group.
we ran 4-week residential executive development programs, 1-week resident. I wonder what the appetite for that would be. And it's much easier to have a personal coach dispatched to you. So maybe there was some cost cutting there too. I don't know. It's hard to understand sometimes.
Well, there was an article written by a guy named William Schaefer, who wrote a book called The Breakthrough Strategy.
Yes.
And it was called, and he called it it was in Harvard Business Review a long time ago, called The Great Programmatic Fallacy. And the idea is that if you can march people off to an abstract training program, albeit in a Marriott hotel, and teach them the 10 lessons of leadership, they would become a leader. Unfortunately, in most cases, there was no correlation between most of these programs didn't give people access to being a great leader or even a good leader. And part of my approach is to focus on the results that people want to achieve. This is one of the things I noticed for myself, because in my earlier career, I did leadership weekends for 30,000 people. You mentioned that earlier, 70% of whom said it would be a life-altering experience. But at the end of the weekend, one thing I had to notice, however miraculous it was, people walked away with realizations, with insights. They didn't walk away with results. And so I started to think about coaching, not in terms of the leadership competency, skills, and capabilities, but the ultimate statement of a leader's consciousness or ability is their ability to help produce results in physical reality that they couldn't produce before. So my approach, the masterful coaching approach, it starts with the result. What is the impossible future or goal that you want to reach? And then I ask people the question, who do you need to be and what do you need to do to realize that impossible future? And realizing an impossible future, if you don't like impossible future, a new future versus the default future, requires transformation. So that's what my approach is based on. It's creating a new future versus a default future, and that always requires transformation. And there was a guy named Noel Tisha. You probably heard of him. He said there was tons of research done on these leadership competencies, but there was not a shred of evidence to show that they had any impact on improving people's leadership ability. So now I'm going off, but what are your thoughts?
Well, in this regards, certainly so many people have contributed so much to the topic of leadership. My earliest mentor was perhaps someone that was familiar to you, Warren Bennis. Warren was my first mentor in life. And, I often think, at the height of his cynicism, when he talked about leadership, he said, never has so much been written about so little. So I think there's some truth to that. And, having worked with executives around the globe as you have, I think a lot of it is around alignment. It's around congruency, and to the extent that the executive, that he or she or they can wrap their heads around what it is they want to accomplish, how they show up, I think they're bound to create some great things. And unfortunately, most get trapped into satisfaction and never get to the point of vision. So I think that's so critical.
That's interesting that you work with Warren Bennis. What was he like?
Warren, the first thing that struck me about Warren was his physical stature. I mean, he was not a very big guy.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
yes, and but yet his insights, I think, like some of the greats, really able to walk into a room, walk into a situation, and size it up very quickly. And
Hmm.
I think it's that sort of experience, that sort of insight that caused him to make so many profound observations about leadership. For example, the one that resonates with so many is that managers do things right, leaders do the right things. It's a really resonant concept for so many.
He said leadership was making vision reality. I think that's one of the
Yes,
definitions I've heard of leadership.
yes.
Um, but you mentioned something a minute ago about alignment, and that's alignment was a concept I started working with. I think I had a program called Vision and Alignment.
Uh-huh.
But as time goes on, uh, I realize that alignment is like the crux of the matter. It's very easy for a CEO or a team leader to come up with a vision. But how often do people come up with the vision or the strategy, sign off on the goals, and then nothing ever happens because there's a lack of alignment? Uh, so I think this is like the power to realize to make a vision reality comes from the ability to create alignment. I think one of the things that happens is that leaders often underestimate the level of time and attention that it actually takes to create alignment. It's a lot of work. It's not something you just have at the meeting and walk out of the meeting and expect it to happen. But the power of the leader comes from their ability to create alignment. But you mentioned that, so I thought I would hit on that because I've kind of rediscovered that it's how important it is. One of the things I've noticed is that I came across the statistics in the Harvard Business Review a while back, where it said that something like 40% of newly hired executives are out the door within 18 months. Why is that? And in most cases, the people are very nice people. They're good people, smart people, capable people, but they get into an organization and they're not able to create alignment. And the result is that they don't succeed.
Right. And as you've helped so many with strengthening their core leadership traits, empathy, responsibility, reflection, resilience, what are some of the ways that you think these um, core leadership traits strengthen alignment or have the potential to strengthen alignment within a team and in an organization?
Well, let me start by saying I recently came across Adam Grant's book called Potential or Hidden Potential.
Hmm.
He said something I thought was very powerful. He said that the greatest indicator or marker of people with high potential is not their credentials. Traditional human resource leaders hire people based on credentials. He said it was their character skills, not their credentials. And character skills are those that are thing. By developing character skills, you can then become the kind of person who's capable of accomplishing greater things. Because when most people come up against a goal that's seemingly difficult or even impossible, they give up. They don't have the character skills to keep going. I think it was Steve Jobs who said that being an entrepreneur was kind of like eating glass. It's not easy. The uh, uh, I forget the name of the author who said that the hard things about hard things is involved with entrepreneurship. So I think that those listening to this podcast should really start to think less in terms of the credentials of the people they hire, whether they went to a prestigious school or they had a prestigious job, and what character skills did they have? And character skills show up when we're taking on the impossible, when we're doing difficult things, when we're dealing with adversity. But let me take your question to another level. You asked something about the development of character skills and the ability to create alignment. And there's 5 character skills, and I'm using a lot of sources here. I'm not trying to name drop, but I like to give credit to where it's due. Doris Kearns Goodwin, the author of Team of Rivals, she said that every great leader has about 5 different character skills. So to put it another way, great leadership requires 5 different character skills. One is the ability to stand for something bigger than yourself. Not many people can do that. 2, honesty and integrity. How can you, if you're a leader who has the character skill of honesty and integrity, you at least have a chance of that people will follow you and stay following you. George Washington, for example, was known as a person of rock solid character. He was a dedicated public servant. He never took a penny in remuneration for his entire life. People trusted him. Okay, next is ambition. And this is something I hope we can inspire everyone in your audience to think about. I have run across a lot of people with tremendous talent and ability and potential. But oftentimes I'm disappointed to find out that those people with talent and ability and high potential don't have any ambition. You can't be a leader without both personal ambition and organizational ambition. That's very important. Now, when you think of, I mentioned Abraham Lincoln a moment ago from Team of Rivals. His partner, William Herndon, his law partner, even though we think of Lincoln as a kind of humble person, he referred to Lincoln as a little engine of ambition. He was constantly plotting and planning how he would get to the top. So, okay, ambition. That's probably the number one lesson for people listening to this to give. You can't be a leader without ambition. And it's important to distinguish between personal ambition and organizational ambition. When Lyndon Johnson was running for president, he was extremely ambitious, too much so, okay? But when he became elected, he put aside his personal ambition and began to develop an ambition for the country, which he called the Great Society. Okay, I think this is 4 is empathy. That they often ask, how did Franklin Delano Roosevelt, how did he turn out to be the person that came out with the New Deal, which was an economic bill of rights for all Americans? Well, he had empathy, and his empathy came from the fact that he contracted polio at a very young age, a relatively young age, in his mid-30s, and he could feel people's pain. Bill Clinton succeeded because of that. Empathy, all right? Drive. You have to, once you set a goal, if you don't have drive, you're never going to realize it. You know, you showed me at the beginning of this show that you had just written a book. And hold up that book again, if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all. Here we go. People Dividend.
The People Dividend. Do you know, people, what it takes to write a book like that? How much drive you have to begin? How much drive do you have to keep going when you get stuck? How much drive you have to actually finish it? There are so many things like that to be a leader, you not only have to have a vision and a goal, you have to have the drive. This is without that, you can never be a leader. But I think I skipped a step. From ambition, from empathy comes responsibility. So if I feel your pain, if I don't feel your pain, I'm never going to take responsibility for you or your family or your community or whatever. But if I have empathy, if I can feel your pain, I'm going to take responsibility. So that's another characteristic that all great leaders have. They walk in the room and they feel responsible. There's a fire in California. They feel responsible. I need to do something about this. They walk into a company and they see people's faces are bowed in resignation versus excited with possibility. This is what leadership is about. And I'll give one last one, which is self-reflectiveness. To be able to be self-reflectiveness is to be the first one to admit, and it's similar to humility, that you made a mistake. if you have these 5 qualities, you're going to show up in the world as a leader.
Now, with how did
Sorry
you
for a long
identify?
answer, but you got me going.
No, it's perfect. How did you identify these qualities? Was it observation? Was it experience? Was it? I mean, what led to these? Because it's a great list. I love how you draw on historical figures in politics, whether it's Washington, Lincoln, or others. And tell me about the ideation of these.
I wrote a book called Your First 100 Days in as a CEO, and then I wrote another book called Your First 100 Days in Politics. And I wanted to identify, I wanted to base the book not on a traditional set of leadership skills and competencies that you would see in a typical corporation. So I said, to succeed as a leader in your first 100 days and beyond, you have to have certain leadership characteristics and traits. And these came down to character skills. Then I studied the 5 greatest presidents of American history, or maybe 4. Washington, Lincoln, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, arguably Lyndon Johnson, and if you're a Republican, I'll put Ronald Reagan in because his words did have an impact on tearing down the Berlin Wall. So I looked at what were the common qualities that the greatest leaders of all time had. They certainly weren't the ability to achieve profit and growth, and I picked them from there. And they're all I can tell you stories about each one of them that fit all of those 5 qualities.
It's so amazing. And I think about your book example. I think about 2 things. My first book, published a couple of years ago, so you can see it behind me perhaps, it was called Integrity by Design, Working and Living Authentically.
Yeah, I was trying to see that. Could you hold that up there? Let me see that again. There you go. Yeah, I love that cover.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And as I, thought about Integrity by Design, that was a book that took me a long time to write. The second book, The People Dividend, a little bit shorter, right? You gain some experience. You figure out certain dynamics in the marketplace, and it's a tough business book market, as you well know at this time, for lots of different reasons. But so I've given a lot of consideration to this topic of integrity because I think it is foundational, as you cite. And to be in integrity means that things hang together. I mean, it's genuine. People experience it as the whole cloth. But again, it's this alignment. It's this congruence between what I say and what I do, and even better, what I think. Because I've been in enough situations in organizations where some executives are reading off a script. Have you experienced that? And, what would you say when there is this absence of integrity? I mean, how it affects the concepts that are so important in your model around ambition and empathy and responsibility and self-reflectiveness?
Well, let me do this by making a distinction. And by the way, I wanted to pause for a moment and ask you about what your thoughts about integrity are.
Well, here's what I know about
anything else
integrity.
you want to say about that before I jump in?
Sure. Here's what I say about integrity. It's funny, some people ask me when I give presentations or talks or work with folks on this topic, is it okay to tell a lie? And I say, I don't know, don't ask me that. But what I can tell you is that when trust erodes, it's very difficult to regain. So if lying is part of a creation of trust erosion, really difficult to recover. So that's why, thinking about this alignment, thinking about congruency is so important to how we show up, because people who have integrity, who have this alignment, who have this congruency, are generally happier people. Now, I don't mean the kind of happiness that comes with having a new boyfriend or girlfriend or the birth of a child. I mean the kind of enduring, sustained happiness. And what we know from the social science research, Robert, as you well know, is that generally people do better at work when they work with happier people. So I
That's
think in
true.
some parts, this is a quest to create that in organizational life, and particularly the concepts I'm working on now around dignity, kindness, and respect.
Well, there's a supermarket not far from where I am now called Market Basket, and it's extremely successful. It's become a multi-billion-dollar business, but it feels like the corner grocery store. And many of the people that work there, at least in the one closest to my home, are Hispanics. Uh, uh, Hispanics, and the owner of and you can tell when you walk into that store that everyone there acts like my expression is owns the game. The customers are happy, the parking lot is full, the employees are happy. You can really see servant leadership. And I read a note sent around Christmas time by the owner of this this group of stores called Market Basket, Demula, Mr. Demula. And he said, everyone matters. Everyone has a place here at Market Basket. Everyone makes a huge contribution. And to express that, I'm going to give everyone who spent a year working here $1,000 Christmas bonus. How many people would do that? The same person, when during the pandemic, uh, he was approached by, they hired McKinsey to make any suggestions about the strategy of the Market Basket organization. And you know what McKinsey's advice was? You could make more money if you raised your prices.
Oh boy.
And you know what Mr. DeMulla's response was? I don't need the money. The people need the money. This goes right along with what you're saying. Kindness, respect, caring, treating each person with dignity.
And you're a customer for life.
And I'm a customer, and here I am talking about it on a podcast.
Here you are, right?
I'm always going over grocery. I spend a lot of time picking out food at the grocery store because my wife doesn't like to drive. And you know what? I always spend an hour, and I always get 95% the exact same thing. So
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing, but
Uh-huh.
I'd like to make a deeper point about this integrity, if I may, using another presidential example.
Surely.
Well, James McGregor Burns, a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian, wrote about Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the book called The Lion and the Fox. And James McGregor Burns was a very, very philosophical, a very deep thinker. He wrote another book called Transformational Leadership. And he said, when it comes to integrity, there's a difference between virtues and values. For example, Roosevelt did not have all the personal virtues that you might like. He said Roosevelt was a liar. He lied to the American public about going into World War II with a Lend-Lease program. He was a cheat. He cheated on his wife. And he said, and he was a thief. I don't remember what the example was of him being a thief. However, he had he had a lot of integrity when it comes to basic human values. He went on. He saw that Hitler, and Mussolini, and Stalin were a threat to democracy, a threat to freedom, a threat to moral values, a threat to human values, and he went over there to try to stop Hitler from conquering the world. He said that a very profound point. He said, in the long eyes of history, personal virtues count for little, and personal and moral values, human values, adherence to those count for a lot. I'm sorry to be too highfalutin.
No, and isn't that great? I mean, as I think about the People Dividend, the title of my podcast show, the podcast show we're recording, title of my most recent book, The People Dividend, Leadership Strategies for Unlocking Employee Potential, I think about those issues in great detail. And I think you're so right to raise them for our consideration because in part, I think, as I understand your messages, Robert Hargrove, is that leading with integrity uplifts people. It uplifts employees, customers, and communities, and creates this lasting positive impact. How do we get more of that in today's environment, Robert? Could you care to do any crystal ball gazing for us?
Well, I would say that it's a great idea, the people dividend. That's a really wonderful, wonderful concept. I've been doing this work for a long time, and I found for many years when I went into an organization, there was what I call a climate, not of possibility, but a climate of profound resignation. Uh, I don't know how many times I heard the phrase working for a major oil company. Uh, I'm just waiting to get to 50.
Mm.
That was like the theme song. That was like the motto. And so when I went in and did my coaching, or when I do
The
my
velvet
coaching,
coffin is, I think it was
yeah,
referred to.
I try to transform a climate of resignation into a climate of possibility. And you know what? It always starts with a leader that gives a hoot about other people. And that, and it trickles down from then. I remember another story. A friend of mine, his name is Greg Goff. He was the CEO of a company called Endeavor. Then he went to work on the ExxonMobil board. And he turned this company around. He doubled the stock it was going bankrupt, and the stock was at 30. It's now at 150. And he created quite a culture. And one day, one of his last days in the company, he was sitting in the cafeteria, and someone approached him as he was eating a bowl of oatmeal. And the guy looked like a Hell's Angel, the guy that was approaching. He said, "Oh, can I talk to you?" He said, "Yeah, you can talk to me." He said, "Well, you've made a difference in my life since you came to the company. As a matter of fact, you made a difference in all our lives. And I just wanted to tell you that." Now, if you go back a year or two or three later in the story, the first time my friend Greg Goff drove up to the company, he came to the gate and he asked, "Where's the parking lot?" And the security guard pointed and said, "It's way over there." He said, "No, I don't want the executive parking lot. I just want the regular people's parking lot." And he refused to park, and he said, "From now on, there will be no executive parking lot." He gets to the front door. He signs in and said, "Oh, thank you, Mr. Goff. You're here now. Can you tell me where the elevator is to the third floor? I'm told my office is. You told me my office is on the third floor." He said, "Well, the elevator's right there." He said, "The executive elevator." He said, "From now on, there will not be any executive elevator. There'll just be an elevator." And the elevator was not used again for the entire time that he was there. He also shut down the executive lunchroom. He treated everybody the same. That's what I try to do. I take pride in having written a book called Masterful Coaching, and I treat a Uber driver, with the same love and respect and dignity and kindness that I do a CEO. If I can have a moment to make a difference in your life through a conversation, I will.
Well, it's so great. Everyone deserves to be loved. And as we sort of begin to wrap up and wind down our discussion on so many great topics, I'm wondering, as you think about the rest of 2025, what's ahead, how would we encourage more humanistic values to be present in our leaders and our organizations? So if you were, as you're talking with our audience, HR leaders, and thinking about, what's left of 2025,
I thought we just started 2025.
what is it that we can do to encourage this humanism?
I think that would be really powerful if everyone in the company had the opportunity to find a hero that represents the highest and best and what it is to be human and what it is to be a leader and what it is to be a manager. I told you, when I wrote my books, I didn't write about CEOs. I wrote about some of the greatest leaders of all time. And so when I do my work with companies, I often talk about Washington and Lincoln and Roosevelt and LBJ and John F. Kennedy, because I want to raise the standard and set the bar of what leadership is about. And so I think if I'm just imagining some kind of, I hate to call it a program, but have a thing where people talk. I can imagine you, for example, Mike, giving a presentation. You put up 5 different leaders on a screen, and then you talk about those. You tell stories about each one of those leaders, and then you say, which one of those leaders would you like to be like? And let people see who they are. So I mentioned 5 of my favorite leaders. How about you telling me 5 of yours? You already mentioned Warren Bennis, which is someone I have a lot of respect for. Because you know why I respect him? Not just because of his books, because I heard him talk to people a few times, and I liked the way he talked to people, how caring he was, and how respectful. So, who would be your top 5 greatest leaders of all time?
Well, I think about, Warren certainly as a mentor and as a thought leader. I've been most impressed by organizational leaders who walk the talk, who are able to get out of their chairs and engage with others beyond their own teams. So my examples would be people in organizations who had a tremendous vision. I think about Art Levinson at Genentech. I mean, as close to founder as you could get, and certainly the creation of the biotech industry quite some time ago. So I certainly think about, his leadership. I think about the leadership of Bill Marriott. I worked at Marriott for a long time, and I think about what he brought to that organization in terms of family and legacy and values, all with the interest of still making money, but was able to sort of practice and live out these values. Those are a couple of examples for me.
I think it's very important that we're going through kind of a generational shift where people barely remember who George Washington or Abraham Lincoln or Franklin Roosevelt is. We've often lost sight of some of the great leaders from business history that you mentioned, Levinson and Bill Marriott, Hewlett and Packard. I think we need to honor the memory and the legacy of these leaders in order to set the standard that we have today beyond people such as Elon Musk or Sam Altman or whoever it is, not to make any judgment about them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this is a very fruitful discussion. We could create something. We could create a book or a program just out of this. Let's do it.
All right. Well, it's been such a delight to be in conversation today with Robert Hargrove. I'm absolutely thrilled about his work, about the contributions in Masterful Coaching that he's made. And in the show notes today, there'll be plenty of ways for you to get in touch with Robert Hargrove. I'd encourage you to do that. And so once again, Robert, thank you so much for being a guest on the People Dividend. I've really enjoyed it.
All right. Thank you very much. And I enjoyed it very much myself. And I really, really appreciate the opportunity.
And until the next episode, stay well.